faithfully conveying value, interpreting the world's best books. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today I'm going to interpret the book The Human History of the Bed for you. In 1999, a Welsh woman traveled hundreds of miles by train, furious, to the Tate Gallery in London because she'd heard about an artwork called My Bed on display. It's a real piece, the actual bed of artist Tracy Emin. The bed had yellowed, crumpled sheets, a dirty blue carpet underneath, and was littered with used condoms, sanitary pads, discarded stockings, vodka bottles, pill boxes, cigarette packs, and more. This Welsh woman approached the piece, pulled out a rag and cleaner, ready to tidy up, but was promptly stopped by the museum's security.
Despite that, in 2014, Tracy's My Bed fetched a whopping $4.3 million at Christie's in London.
But the controversy surrounding this piece has never stopped. It's because to most people, a bed isn't just a necessity for sleep, it symbolizes personal privacy. It's totally inappropriate to show it off in public, especially like this. A filthy, chaotic, and completely unappealing bed. So, how exactly is the bed, as a daily necessity, tied to sleep and privacy? And what different roles has the bed played throughout human history? Today's book, The Human History of the Bed, will guide you through the bed's journey from past to present. The author, Brian Fagan, is not just an internationally acclaimed expert in prehistoric archaeology, he's also a leading archaeological writer. His research spans a wide range, from climate change and human interactions with animals and plants to the evolution of daily life aspects like clothing, food, shelter, and transportation. He's advised organizations like the UK's National Geographic Society, Encyclopedia Britannica, and Microsoft Encarta on archaeology. For his work in archaeology and education, Brian Fagan received the inaugural Public Education Award from the American Archaeological Association. In the book, Fagan uses archaeology to explore the various forms and roles beds have played across human history. Now, I'll break down the book's key points into 3 questions for you. First, how did our ancestors transition from sleeping in trees to sleeping in beds? Second, what other roles has the bed taken on in human life? Third, how the form of the bed evolved for convenience and comfort. First, let's discuss the book's first question. How did our ancestors transition from sleeping in trees to sleeping in beds? When talking about beds, you might first think of sleep. Modern humans spend about 1/3 of their lives in bed, primarily for sleep. However, in ancient times, people often slept in trees to avoid beast attacks. Only after early humans learned to use fire did they gradually start moving and sleeping on the ground. And back then, they usually slept directly on the ground. Though it was damp, cold, and occasionally disturbed by insects, sleeping with their ears close to the ground allowed them to detect threats promptly. But, the prototype of the human bed appeared around 77,000 years ago. Archaeologists discovered in a cave in South Africa that humans living there had woven mats from rushes and other weeds to place on the ground. They also used laurel leaves to repel insects while sleeping, and elevated beds appeared later. The Orkney Islands in Scotland preserve the earliest stone beds, dating back to 3200 BC. These stone beds were found in stone house ruins, built like boxes against walls. Typically, a room had one large and one small stone bed, and some beds had high phosphorus levels detected. Archaeologists speculate it might have been caused by infant bedwetting. These stone houses had a hearth in the center, and beds were covered with blankets made of animal hides to withstand Scotland's harsh winters. There were indentations around the beds which archaeologists believe might have been used to insert wooden poles. Curtains were hung on the poles, suggesting that the Orkney people likely began treating beds as private spaces. If the Orkney beds were akin to modern box beds, then evidence of the earliest four-legged beds was found on the Maltese Islands in the Mediterranean. And now, murals there, completed around 3500 BC, depict people using four-legged beds. However, Compared to modern four-legged beds, the legs in the murals were much shorter. During the peak of Mesopotamian and ancient Egyptian civilizations, bed usage became more widespread. Ancient Sumerians made beds by fixing wooden frames to legs. Similarly, ancient Egyptians used wood for bed frames, wove leather straps, and covered them with reed mats to create beds. And they were usually slightly inclined surfaces, with people lying at the higher end, equivalent to resting on a pillow. Around 2580 BC, burial goods of an ancient Egyptian queen included a luxurious bed with a canopy and gold-wrapped legs. 3 centuries later, an Egyptian chancellor's tomb featured bed-related murals, one showing him reclining on a wedding bed's headboard while his wife knelt playing harp. Below were various offerings and storage jars. The bed in the mural closely resembled modern four-legged beds. In China's late Shang dynasty, 13 to 11th century BC, similar beds called high couches appeared. Yet whether in ancient West or China, beds remained exclusive to royalty and nobility. Higher sleeping places indicated higher status, while most poor still slept on ground wrapped in blankets or coats. But since Middle Ages, beds entered ordinary Western households. For most families, beds became not just essential furniture but symbols of household wealth. 17th century London writer Samuel Pepys noted in his diary, "I'm proud to have an extra bed for visiting friends." Some families prized both quantity and size. Beds up to 4 meters wide filled entire rooms for family sleeping. Bedding, mattresses, and pillows. These beddings emerged, indistinguishable from modern ones, some exquisitely crafted. London's V&A Museum houses a 14th century quilt, cotton-filled, linen-covered, back-embroidered with 14 intricate patterns of castles, ships, and battle scenes. Middle or upper-class bedding was complex. Housekeeping manuals advocated daily mattress flipping and twice-daily pillowcase changes. Bedding maintenance was laborious, making maids essential workers in wealthy homes. This concludes the book's first question. As civilization progressed, our ancestors descended from trees to ground sleeping, gradually mastering bed craftsmanship. By the Middle Ages, beds were already widely used in the West. But throughout human history, beds haven't just been for sleeping. Now for our second question, let's discuss beds. What roles have they played in history?
We'll focus on two key aspects. First, beds as witnesses to human life and death.
Second, beds as social and workspaces. First, let's explore how beds witnessed births and deaths. Many are born on delivery beds today, but this practice actually started in 17th century France. Before that, Western women gave birth on birthing stools. Beds were just for postpartum recovery. Legend says Louis XIV loved watching childbirth, but birthing stools blocked his view, so he pushed for beds to become the new norm. The connection between beds and death goes way further back, though. Archaeologists find bodies in tombs often posed in sleeping positions, on their backs or curled on their sides. People have always linked sleep and death. We say the deceased rest in peace. In ancient Mesopotamia, bodies were moved to special funeral beds with an empty chair left beside it, believed to be for the soul. The body would be cleansed, anointed with oils or spices, surrounded by cherished items and sandals, because Mesopotamians saw sandals as essential for the afterlife journey. Ancient Egyptians practiced bed burials, placing bodies on beds or stretchers for burial. Pharaoh Tutankhamun was buried on an exquisite gilded bed inside a lion-carved coffin with golden shrines around it. For Catholics and Muslims, deathbed prayers are a religious duty. It helps guide every soul to the afterlife. For royalty, deathbeds were power transition sites. Their smoothness affected nations' futures. In 1603, as Queen Elizabeth I lay dying, her deathbed was crowded with maids, doctors, priests, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Privy Council members awaiting final words. Beyond life and death, beds also served as social hubs. For example, in the late 16th century, a White Hart Inn in Ware, Hertfordshire, north of London, became famous because it had a giant bed, over 3 meters long and wide, 2.5 meters high, weighing 640 kilograms, and it could sleep 4 couples at once without them touching. This bed was so famous that many literary works used it as a metaphor for the concept of bigness. Shakespeare described a letter full of lies in his famous play Twelfth Night, saying it was written on paper. Even though your paper was big enough to cover that bed in Ware, England. Ha ha ha. Later in 2012, the British spent 6 days dismantling this giant bed to move it to a museum, and another 9 days to transport it. The custom of sharing a bed in inns was common in other regions too. Former U.S. President Abraham Lincoln often shared a bed with others in inns before becoming president. In ancient China and Mongolia, the kang was essential in many inns, a large heated platform that could sleep several people. People not only slept on it, but also ate and socialized there. Today, some place names still retain traces of this practice. For instance, Liu Pukong, near Beijing's Drum Tower Street, got its name from a small inn there in the late Qing dynasty. It's said this small inn was tiny, with just one large earthen khan that could hold up to 6 beddings. Bedding in beds. Beyond socializing, for many European monarchs, state affairs revolved around the bed. For example, Queen Elizabeth I's bed was in the palace's central bedroom, an opulent bed with a gilded carved frame, silver threads, and velvet. She even brought thousands of servants when traveling. They served around this bed, but most couldn't get close to it. The queen's bedroom was guarded by 146 soldiers, and only a few female attendants could enter. Men were forbidden entry. In 1599, the Earl of Essex rushed from Ireland to the palace and accidentally entered, seeing Elizabeth without her wig, makeup, and in disheveled clothes. Although he knelt begging for forgiveness, the next day he was confined and later executed for treason. Across the Channel in France, as early as the 13th century, Louis IX enacted a code stipulating that the royal bed should always be the place where the king passed judgment. And by the 17th century, under Louis XIV, the French king's bed had even more elaborate protocols with grand daily awakening ceremonies. After rising, the king would receive routine health checks from his chief physician and chief surgeon, followed by meals, state affairs, and private gatherings. Louis XIV's bed was placed on a 7-step platform. He'd issue commands while sitting or lying on it. Ranking officials stood below the bed. Lower-ranking ones had to kneel. In the 18th century, Louis XV preferred holding meetings in his bedroom, called bed councils, attended only by core ministers. But as civilization progressed, growing self-awareness made people value privacy more. By the 19th century, beds became private spaces in most Western homes, and socializing or working in bed gradually disappeared. One exception was British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Churchill suffered from depression and chronic sleep deprivation. Working from his bedroom perhaps saved sleep time, but it proved awkward. For example, Chief of the Imperial General Staff, Alan Brooke, recorded in his diary their January 27, 1942 meeting. Churchill wore a gold-trimmed red robe, his thinning hair disheveled, the bed piled with documents and letters, breakfast plates on the headboard. Churchill kept ringing the bedside bell for secretaries, servants, typists, and stenographers to enter.
Such scenes always embarrassed Lord Alan Brooke.
Sleep habits have also evolved. Now we often say the best sleep is 8 uninterrupted hours. But anciently, people didn't sleep that way. Back then, sleep was typically biphasic or polyphasic, segmented. Simply put, people slept in segments. Primitive humans rose with dawn and rested at dusk. After dark with little to do, they slept early. Plus, sleeping on uncomfortable ground with beast threats made continuous sleep impossible, so they wake up once or multiple times in between. Research shows the sleep pattern persisted into modern times and was quite common. According to writers like Chaucer, the English often started their first sleep early in the evening. Then they'd wake before midnight, have a snack, pray, discuss their dreams, then enjoy a second sleep after midnight. This might be the origin of night watches in some European countries. Even into the 18th century, vendors roamed London's midnight streets selling food to those awake. But after the Industrial Revolution, sleep habits changed. Streetlights lit cities, nightlife flourished, people slept later, and with comfier beds and safer environments, sleep became one solid block, creating the 8-hour sleep concept. Nowadays, some who wake once or twice nightly often suspect sleep disorders and start taking sleeping pills. It might not be a disorder at all, just our ancestors' unique sleep pattern passed down to us. That concludes the book's second question. Beds witnessed life and death and served as key social and workspaces. With industrialization and progress, beds became private spaces and people grew accustomed to 8-hour sleep. During this evolution, people continually refined bed designs for convenience and comfort. Next, in part 3, we'll explore this topic. First, convenience. Beds we imagine are usually bulky and hard to move. Travelers couldn't carry heavy beds, so they invented portable ones. The earliest portable beds appeared in ancient Egypt, where pharaohs traveled extensively to balance tribal powers. Pharaohs refused to sleep in others' beds or on the ground, so they invented foldable travel beds. For example, 14th century BC Pharaoh Tutankhamun used a Z-shaped trifold bed with copper alloy legs and frame. Starting with warlike ancient Romans, camp beds became standard military gear in European armies. For instance, Roman soldiers used bunk-style camp beds, while commanders had spacious, comfy, but heavy ones. Camp beds could sometimes affect the outcome of wars. In 1858, British forces led by Marshal Colin Campbell suffered heavy losses against rebels in colonial India, partly due to their baggage burden. Reportedly, a significant portion of their baggage consisted of beds. A Times journalist recalled that Marshal Campbell alone carried various beds from 4 posters to camp beds. In contrast, Indian camp beds were far lighter, called charpe. Simply put, 4 tapered wooden legs, detachable crossbars, assembled with elastic coir fibers. No mattress needed, yet incredibly comfy. Beyond military use, Indian pilgrims often carried disassembled charpe on their heads during travels. Today, sleeper trains and RVs offer diverse options for long journeys. Sleeper trains first appeared in 1830s America. Back then, seats converted to sleeping spaces at night. RVs emerged in early 20th century Canada. By 2019, over 8 million U.S. Canadian households owned them. Modern sleeping bags, a bed variant, originated with German farmers sleeping in sacks stuffed with leaves or straw. Later, polar explorer Fridtjof Nansen learned from Arctic Sami people to create warm sealskin sleeping bags. Today's Moni-shaped sleeping bags use synthetic fibers for waterproof warmth. After portable beds, let's discuss comfort beds, where mattresses are crucial for support. With industrial progress, mattress makers focused intensely on comfort. As early as the 16th century, French furniture maker William Desjardins invented the wind bed, essentially an inflatable canvas mattress, but unsolvable leaks doomed its commercial success. With technological advances, durable air mattresses emerged in late 19th century America. By the 1980s, water beds, mattresses filled with water, gained popularity again in the U.S. Many believed sleeping on water beds relieved back pain, but they felt damp and required plumbing into bedrooms. If they leaked during sleep, sweet dreams turned into nightmares. That's why few American households use waterbeds today. Compared to air or water beds, our common Simmons mattress has proven enduring. Simply put, a Simmons mattress is a spring mattress, named after American furniture merchant Zalman Simmons. He made the first spring mattress in 1876, patented it, and it took the world by storm. For over a century, to enhance comfort, today's mattress makers use every trick in the book. For example, some spring mattresses feature adjustable lumbar support systems, sleepers can customize firmness. One Californian maker creates mattresses with thousands of micro springs wrapped in cotton batting. With 10 plus layers, including New Zealand wool, they're ultra plush. 10 artisans spend 3 days per mattress. The author believes future beds will prioritize convenience and comfort, like pod beds resembling spacecraft capsules. While lounging, this bed conveniently meets all your needs. Computers monitor comfort, auto-adjusting temperature, lighting, even external noise levels. When needed, it gently rocks or offers massages. Hot beds include multimedia, watch TV, browse, or work without getting up. The author also envisions future cloud beds, essentially magnetic beds levitating midair. Sleeping feels like floating on a magic carpet, revolutionizing sleep. This concludes the book's third question. For portability, beds evolved into foldables, sleeping bags, hammocks, while air, water, and spring beds focused on mattress innovation. For more comfortable sleep, the author believes future beds will include pods, cloud beds, and other forms to meet diverse needs, from grass mats over 70,000 years ago to today's futuristic bedding. In bed's evolution, we see changing customs and ideas, but what remains constant is that beds always carry our innermost dreams. Whether it's winter night cuddling warmth, longing for intimate connections, or displays of power and wealth, the history of beds is also our own history. All right, that's all for the human history of the bed. Wishing you sweet dreams every night. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.